Whether you've lived here for a year or a lifetime, you may be familiar with something called TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Every one of us feels its impact. New roads? You'll vote on any new funding for that. More cash for education? You'll vote on new funding for that, too. Go on down the list. Just about every legislative priority runs into the TABOR roadblock, requiring a vote of the people before it can happen. Now, plenty of people love it. No one can tax me without my permission, but some say the Bill of Rights is choking out progress in the name of keeping a balanced budget. Here at Denver 7, 360 is our commitment to showing you multiple angles of a story, allowing you to make up your mind. Well, TABOR certainly deserves the 360 treatment, and here is Mark Stewart.
With views like this, along with skiing, snowboarding, hiking, and yes, the Broncos, it's easy to understand why people like living in Colorado. Yet there's another reason on that long list. Compared to other states, our taxes are reasonable. Wallet Hub ranks us as number 13 for the lowest taxes in the country. So why are taxes lower here in Colorado? One big reason, TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Promoted by Republican lawmaker Douglas Bruce, voters in Colorado passed it back in 1992. Under TABOR, taxes cannot be raised without approval from you, the voter. That includes sales tax and property taxes.
It ensures that government cannot grow beyond what the people want it to do.
Supporters like Michael Fields of the conservative-leaning group Americans for Prosperity argue TABOR leads to smart spending and prevents government from getting out of control, giving the people of Colorado the power to decide when it's appropriate to tax.
I think you make the case to the people. If you want to invest in something more, then go make the case to the people, convince them that they need more revenue at the Capitol, and that'll pass.
But there's another side to TABOR.
It's not something good to have on our books. It's actually hindered our ability as a state to do many things.
Opponents like Amy Baca-Ohlert of the Colorado Education Association feel TABOR is a roadblock to lawmakers, preventing them from making reasonable spending decisions in places that are needed most, like our schools.
And that just doesn't seem right in a state with such a fast-growing economy.
The fact remains, our state needs money to fix our ailing roads and bridges. So a push is underway right now to convince voters to approve a sales tax hike this November. Educators are also pushing a tax increase to help our schools. There have been other challenges over the years, some successful. So what's next? For the moment, TABOR is here to stay. In order for it to be reversed completely, we as Coloradans would have to vote to change it. In Denver, Mark Stewart, Denver 7.
Now to a brand new Magellan poll when voters in the 5th Congressional District were asked about the Republican primary race for governor. 34% of GOP voters say they have not made up their mind. Among candidates, Walker Stapleton has the most support with 32%. And the poll shows a comfortable margin over his three opponents, Victor Mitchell, Doug Robinson, and Greg Lopez. Now this poll, yes, included primarily Republicans, some independents who will have a chance to vote in the Republican primary if they so choose. And Blair Miller of the DenverChannel.com has been tracking these developments and several more in the political world for us this week and joins us now. So glad you are here. Yeah. Let's first talk about that Magellan poll that was just for the 5th Congressional District, but so I suppose it's not surprising, those numbers.
No, it wasn't surprising. You know, I mean, they polled that district specifically because it's sort of, you don't want to say the bellwether for the Republican vote in the state, but it has the greatest share of Republicans who generally vote in the primaries in the past. So polling those people, it was mostly about Congress, but they also asked about the governor's race, sort of a temperature taker here as we get about 4 weeks almost out of the primaries.
So we've known Walker Stapleton is leading. Any other surprise in those numbers on that Republican side for governor?
I think there's a lot of surprising numbers out of that. The biggest one being the 34% who are still undecided. I mean, starting a week from Monday, I believe, is when they're going to start mailing out ballots, so people can vote as soon as then. Right. And then the primary is coming up in a little over 4 weeks. So with 1/3 of those Republican voters still undecided for governor, it kind of signals to me that no one's really stood out so far.
We also saw some numbers regarding the race for Congress, and Doug Lamborn had a sizable lead.
After all of that news and the discussion of whether or not he was going to make the ballot, it doesn't necessarily seem to have translated to the voters of their concern. He's up 10 points on Daryl Glenn right now, and you know, that with a margin of error of 4.3%, that's definitely enough space for Glenn if he can really make a good push over the next 5 weeks to take him over. But right now, according to that poll, it looks like Lamborn's in for a 7th term. And you know, some of the other stuff that's interesting in that poll was that younger people really like Doug Robinson, older people like Victor Mitchell, and it sort of signified that Victor Mitchell in the governor's race could be kind of a dark horse in there, when it seemed like everyone else has said that Stapleton might run away with this nomination.
He's certainly done a lot of advertising. All right, let's switch to North Korea right now. We know that President Trump canceled plans to meet with the North Korean leader, and we had an opportunity to speak with the former U.S. Ambassador Christopher Hill about the situation with North Korea. He says the summit was flawed from the start.
The question will be what comes next. Will there be those diplomatic discussions that I think are so necessary to prepare in the way? Will there be a willingness from the North Koreans to do away with their nuclear weapons? I haven't seen that to date, but maybe they will be interested.
It'll certainly be an interesting topic because who knows what the North Koreans will do. But you were able to get some statements from our congressional delegation on their reaction to this decision.
And yeah, and I think that, you know, what Ambassador Hill said is kind of the general overall sentiments from the people I talked to, is that, you know, North Korea is still a big unknown on all this, and I think that's part of what caught everybody by surprise of how these talks have gone down over the past couple of months, and why it was kind of surprising that Trump himself canceled when just before that Mike Pompeo and other people had been saying, oh, well, we're going to leave it.
It's set.
North Korea is
going
to do it. And interestingly, with the members of Congress that I talked to, Cory Gardner specifically, he said that Kim Jong-un decided to make it impossible to have this meeting, and said he'd find a way back to the table, sort of insinuating that Kim was the one who walked away from this. And everyone basically blamed North Korea's statement about Mike Pence, calling him a political dummy, for the basis of this cancellation. But I think that was sort of the back and forth between, you know, who was sort of the impetus for the cancellation of these things. And you had Michael Bennet blaming North Korea, but also blaming Trump for his words and actions. And Mike Coffin essentially just throwing his hands up in the air and is like, I'm tired of the rhetoric. We need to denuclearize North Korea, and that's all I want.
Well, that is a loaded subject, isn't it? Blair Miller of the DenverChannel.com will be talking about this and so many more issues in the weeks and months to come. We'll be right back.